Mr. Speaker, there have been incredible delays and uncertainty in the actions taken by the Premier to help victims of the flood around Lake Manitoba, and some people are here today in the gallery. Now, some people have been given up to 3 different levels as to how high their homes must be raised. Some by 5 feet, 5 feet as written by Bruce Owen of the Free Press, but others by different amounts. Money to help has flowed so slowly, however, that it's making the situation worse. How can the Premier be so quick and so certain when making a decision to sacrifice people around Lake Manitoba and yet move with such delay and such uncertainty when acting to help those who've been so hurt and so victimized by his initial decisions?
We acted extremely rapidly to build the additional channel in Lake St. Martin, which has brought down Lake Manitoba by an additional 3 feet if the channel were not there, and by at least a couple of feet on Lake St. Martin itself, and that was to relieve the pressure on Lake Manitoba. At the same time, to date, we've flowed $600 million in compensation, and we have put additional resources in place to deal with compensation requests and to do the appraisals necessary to award compensation. So the member is wrong. We have moved with a great deal of speed to provide support to people. First of all, on the prevention side, we put flood tubes out there. We did everything we could to prevent damage. But in the case where damage has occurred, additional resources have been put in place for compensation, and additional structural changes have been made to the lakes to allow more flow, which has occurred all winter long, which has made a tremendous difference in the levels of the lake. And now we will move to make further investments that will allow the lake to stay down lower in the future, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, even today, the Premier is wrong. There's tremendous uncertainty in what the government's plans are for Lake Manitoba, and this is causing uncertainty as to whether it is worth rebuilding. Now, the government recently sent a letter to municipalities, which I tabled, indicating it expects the water to rise again to around 818 feet above sea level. Instead, last August, the government should have made it very clear it was going to make the changes so the lake level could be lowered to around 810.5 and kept there for 2 years so the lake itself can heal, people can recover and rebuild. Why is the Premier not even today made clear his long-run vision for Lake Manitoba so that property owners, lending institutions, rural municipalities can make decisions and rebuild?
The whole purpose of proceeding with the emergency channel as rapidly as we did was to bring the lake down as quickly as possible without putting anybody else at risk of flooding. And as I said earlier, we've already flowed over $600 million in compensation. We have struck an independent committee chaired by a very respected engineer who has been involved in flood matters for well over 2 decades now, to give us recommendations on any additional measures that we need to take, including making the emergency channel permanent. We have put in place additional measures to protect people as early as last summer and in the fall, and we are very interested in finding permanent solutions to give people greater comfort about what the range of the lake will be, bearing in mind that that was a once-in-400-year event never seen before on Lake Manitoba. Now we have to look at how to rebuild both cottages and homes and additional public works that will ensure the lake no longer floods out people on either Lake St. Martin or Lake Manitoba. That's our objective, is to stabilize people's lives around that lake and to do it as rapidly as possible.
Mr. Speaker, the Premier obfuscates instead of providing a clear plan. Delays and obfuscation, that's what we get. Yesterday, I was at Big Point on Lake Manitoba. The devastation there is unbelievable. The front of whole homes have been torn away. And because people were not given enough warning that their homes were to be sacrificed, prized possessions are lying around or buried in the sand brought in by the waves. It is heartbreaking just to look. And yet this government is moving so slowly, with such uncertainty, that the hurt goes on and on and on. When will the Premier provide a clear vision so that people will be able to make decisions and decide whether it is worth rebuilding or whether they are going to be sacrificed by this Premier again?
The lake is already down 4 feet from the peak that had occurred last year. It's around 813 feet. The channel has been able to make a gigantic difference in how rapidly the lake has come down. We have put in place an independent body called the Lake Manitoba Regulation Committee with experts on it. They will give us advice as to other long-term measures that we need to put in place. And in the meantime, We are continuing to put compensation out there for people, $600 million paid out to date. We think that we know there has been frustrations. We know there have been people that have suffered, and that's why we've put additional resources out there to ensure the compensation flows even more rapidly. It has been an extremely traumatic time for all the families, businesses, and cottagers along that lake, which is why we've made an unprecedented commitment of about $1 billion to deal with the Lake Manitoba problem, and we will continue to find long-term solutions to allow people to have greater security in what the lake levels will be, barring further unforeseen events of Mother Nature. The event that occurred was the worst we've ever seen. We hope it never happens again, but if it does, we'll be ready.
Order, please. Order, please.